TCL's best ever TV is here. After watching it side by side with the best OLED TVs of 2024, including the LG G4, and then closely comparing their motion, upscaling, sports, HDR movies, streaming Netflix, YouTube, and it straight up beat the LG G4 in image processing. Wow! To be trading blows and landing punches on the G4 is no small feat. After watching this video, my friends, you're going to agree that you will have to spend a whole lot of money to beat the TCL QM8. Sony Bravia 9, anybody? Today's video is brought to you by WhoKeys. Trying to build a PC on a budget but don't know where to buy your Windows software cheaply? WhoKeys to the rescue. Use my coupon code SF20 and immediate discount with a free upgrade to Windows 11. At the bottom of this order where it says code CARD, to the right is the product key you need to activate Windows. So copy this long number, then go to the Windows menu and click on Settings. In the Settings menu at the bottom, select Update and Security. Select Activation, then select Change Product Key, paste what you copied from WhoKeys, click Next, click Activate, and you're done. You can buy Windows 11 Pro or Office 2019 Pro with my discount code SF20. Yes, I've been using WhoKeys for the last several years on my own PC builds and it just works. The 2024 TCL QM8, also known as the QM8 51G, is TCL's best TV ever released in North America. Okay, the QM8 591G is probably better, but it's 115 inches and over $10,000, so let's put that aside for now. From 65, 75 to 85 inches, I think also 98 inches, right? These four sizes, you will not get a better TV from TCL this year. Now, the best from TCL, well, what does that really mean? So today, we're going to find out what does the best from TCL bring to the table compared to the best from LG, the G4, and the best from Samsung, the S95D, and the best from Hisense, the U8N. My TV is a 65-inch size as well as the other three TVs, but most importantly, this TV is what I think most of you will be watching it in a normally lit room, right? We're not talking filmmaker mode, creator's intent, super accurate. For that, you're going to have to get it calibrated in a completely dark room, and that's a completely different video. I'm going for the 99% use case. Those of you shopping for the TCL QM8 will be in a normally lit room, meaning the LG G4 will probably be in cinema home, whereas the Samsung S95D will have its tone mapping active on. Both of these settings give both OLED TVs their brightest impact in a normally lit room because people are complaining, oh, OLED's not bright enough. Guess what? They are bright enough now while preserving that black shadow detail, right? That infinite contrast. The question is whether this year's QM8 can match the strength of the OLED, the infinite contrast, the shadow detail, while also showing off its brightness in a bright room. More importantly, the QM8 is about 1/3 the price of the S95D and the G4. How close does it get? And remember, these TVs are not calibrated. It's out of the box, so most people get to experience what these OLEDs versus MiniLED TVs are like when they're not calibrated. If they're all calibrated and put in a dark room, that's a different kind of shootout. The theme of today's video is the point of diminishing returns begins with the TCL QM8, and I'm going to show you why. We'll start with TV audio. Why? Well, Netflix research has shown that over 80% of their viewers just watch with TV audio, not even a sound bar. So in that case, if you're one of those, my friends, this is an important comparison for you. How does the TCL QM8 for 2024 compare in terms of TV audio without a sound bar, without any additional subwoofers? How does it compare to the LG G4, the Samsung S95D, and a similarly priced Hisense U8N? The setup is pretty simple. I sat around 7 feet away from these four 65-inch TVs using a sound meter. I set their volume so that they would be between 75 and 85 decibels, plus or minus a decibel or two, right? Most importantly, the limiting TV was actually a Samsung S95D. At around 80, it wouldn't get that much louder, and any louder, you could kind of hear a little distortion. So I guess the S95D kind of set the volume. Now the G4 is a bit louder, had more headroom, and the QM8 and the U8N both had a lot more headroom. So even though I put them to try and match the volume of the G4, I can tell you could probably go a bit louder. So you could sit about 9-10 feet away and definitely get the volume you need. Check it out.
say that I will get there soon. 30 days I walk down this way, singing my madness to the moon. I met a cat on a tree, and it talked to me about things we don't see. I asked it, how do I know which is the right way to go to get me home? And it said, don't look for a reason, don't look for another way, 'cause anyway we'll get you home. You can't get lost if you don't know where you go. And 3,000 miles from home, trying to say that I will get there soon. 30 days I walk down this way, singing my madness to the moon. I met a cat on a tree, and it talked to me about things we don't see. I asked it, how do I know which is the right way to go to get me home? And it said, don't look for a reason, don't look for another way, 'cause anyway we'll get you home. You can't get lost if you don't know where you go. 3,000 miles from home, trying to say that I will get there soon. 30 days I walk down this way, singing my madness to the moon. I met a cat on a tree, and it talked to me about things we don't see. I asked it, how do I know which is the right way to go to get me home? And it said, don't look for a reason, don't look for another way. And it said, don't look for a reason, don't look for another way, 'cause anyway we'll get you.
At the end of this, how did the QM8 compare? Well, first, the U8N, unbelievable sound. Loud enough, balanced, out of the box, right? The settings were just great. I loved it. The QM8, a little bit louder, but the subwoofer, or rather the bass level, it didn't have quite the impact. I mean, it was close, and the treble was a bit hot. So if you notice that, definitely play with the EQ in the QM8 or play with the various sound modes, but out of the box, it felt a bit bright to me. Now the G4, very good. As a matter of fact, much better than last year's G3, but given that the U8N sounds so good, while the S95D, I don't know what happened. So S95D definitely needs help. It needs a sound bar and a sub. The U8N, my favorite of this group. Next up is motion. A lot of people complain about TCL and Hisense's motion processing. Has it improved? This year's G4 motion I thought was the best, matching the Sony A95L, which is not easy to do, and the Samsung is right behind, right there. So let's see. Motion testing, how does the TCL QM851G compare to the best out there? On this pattern, it's impressive, especially with the granular control of the QM8. I did not see that last year. It is here this year. Not only did it catch up to the Hisense motion processing, but I believe it exceeded it and matches the G4, at least in a pattern. So beyond the pattern, let's talk about actual movie content. What if I set the TCL QM8 to its lowest judder of 1 and the G4 to its cinema movement, which I really like, and the Samsung to my best setting motion of around 3, and the Hisense, well, we'll see how it does, right? Because this from Army of the Dead is a great scene to look at stuttering, and As you can see, the QM8 nails it, easily matching what cinema movement is doing on the G4 at a judder of 1 without introducing excessive soap opera. Now I know it's subjective. Some of you are very sensitive to soap opera, so you may say, oh wait, that's too much soap for me. Fair enough. For me though, I thought it matched my settings on the G4 and the S95D better than ever before, and the U8N. You notice a little bit of that weird artifacting, right? Apparently its judder was on 5. You would think 5 would be really good. I moved it down to 1. So let's see what happens. And yes, actually looks pretty good too. So the Hisense at a judder of 1, very similar to the QM8, maybe I'd say just barely a step behind. But when you max out the judder to the smoothest movement possible, the QM8 nails it. No artifacts. Whatever TCL did, whatever magic sauce and processing it did in 2024, it's caught up to the big 3. Hear that, guys? It's caught up. Unbelievable. And TCL didn't even make a big deal out of it. I'm looking at this, I'm like, wait, they did a whole lot more than just improve the processing as far as motion is concerned. They took huge leaps. So I'm confident that as far as motion is concerned, I believe it's solved. What about sports? We're talking real content. So all the TVs were set in their best sports mode with their motion processing set to high. I mean, the whole goal is motion resolution, right? Let's see how they do. Watching this tennis match, you can see that the QM8 is definitely keeping up with the best from Samsung and LG. Now remember, this is low bitrate sports content from YouTube TV. So we know that the QM8 did really well with high bitrate content on Netflix and Disc Player. But here, we discovered that maybe it struggles a touch when there's not enough information, which is what happens when you have low bitrate content. Right there, caught it. You see that? The G4 flexes right here. So for low bitrate content on YouTube TV sports, G4 demonstrating what flagship motion processing should be, with the U8N right there, and then the S95D showing just a touch of glitching with the QM8 falling last. TCL, check this out. You need to work on low bitrate sports motion. Speaking of YouTube, so let's forget sports on YouTube TV. Low bitrate, whatever. Regular YouTube, high quality content. I'm talking about Jennifer Gala's 4000 nit Super HDR channel content designed to test these super bright mini LEDs, comparing image processing of the best on YouTube. Using Jennifer's content, I was impressed. Check it out. In bright content, the QM8 matched both the S95D and the G4. Most surprisingly, in the brightest content with specular highlights and detail, the QM8 did better. Yes, these are the blows and the punches I'm talking about. Check out how, in this scene, the QM8 gives you more clarity of that fine detail. Now, in the G4, I tried to play with the settings, right? Turn tone mapping off. What happens? It got dimmer. Tried to set it on professional mode. Did not help. More surprisingly still was that the Hisense U8N was even better than the QM8 in rendering detail on YouTube. Now, if I were to rank it in these kind of scenes, U8N number 1, then QM8, then the S95D, then the G4 if you're looking at clarity and specular detail. Brightness, QM8 is first, U8N is second, then the G4, then the S95D. Now raising the exposure, the contrast on both OLED TVs are a touch better. In this scene, you see how much brighter the QM8 is than the other TVs while preserving the color and contrast. Now, this is a weakness right here. As you can see, black level slightly lifted, U8N kills it here. Now back on Earth, I love this scene right here because it shows detail that's black level detail, shadow detail against a very bright scene. And as you can see, when exposure is normal, it looks great. But if I raise the exposure, the detail's preserved, and the darkest part of this scene, that guy walking, Black levels are the same. But notice that the U8N has the most color resolution, whereas the QM8 is a little bit washed out. You lose a little bit of color right here. So there's still work to be done for the QM8. In my opinion, for YouTube TV, this sort of amazing bright content on Jennifer's channel, the Hisense U8N totally kills it. At the end of the day, the G4 has gone beyond what it's capable of. When it goes that bright, it could not control the clipping. Ultimately, it was too bright for its own good. Now, you wouldn't know that without the QM8, ironically. The QM8 demonstrates what that clarity looks like, and ready for the biggest surprise, the U8N was the best at this. Both mini LED TVs did better than either the S95D or the G4 while preserving that brightness. I mean, this 4000 nit mini LED brightness test, finally, thank you Jennifer for this, we have content that pushes OLED TVs way beyond their comfort zone. And I know I'm not an OLED hater. I love my A95L, I love my A95K, I love my G4, but they are the masters of their domain under 1000 nits. Above 1000 nits, this is where mini LED TVs come to play. And that's where we get back to what I was talking about at the beginning of this video, which is if you're in a normally lit room, right? That low range content, that shadow detail, it's lost in a bright room. I mean, your eyes are adjusting to the ambient light. It's not going to notice the fine shadow detail in a bright room. In a dark room, very dark room, OLED untouchable. But in a bright room, this is where this QM8 is coming on its own, and I love it. But speaking of high quality content, that was high quality YouTube. What about high quality Spears & Munsell Benchmark Disc? Let's check it out. We'll set the content at 2000 nits because realistically, most of your content will be below 2000 nits, more often than not below 1000. And consider this. The G4 and the S95D should do very well up to 2000 nits. So the QM8 and the U8N is playing against the strengths of the G4 and the S95D. I don't expect the QM8 to beat them, but how close can they get? Already we see the limits of the QM8 tone mapping, where the G4 has that range of super bright specular highlight with great tone mapping at 2000 nits. The S95D, slightly more aggressive tone mapping to give you more detail. And the QM8, although slightly brighter, you're losing some of that tone mapped goodness in terms of the detail in the clouds. And the U8N, definitely behind the QM8. Tone mapping is just short of the best. However, dropping the brightness to 1000 nits, the QM8 is as good as the other TVs. And it feels like color saturation of the QM8 is a little bit behind the S95D and the U8N, but very similar to the G4. Again, all four TVs are in their bright room mode. The G4 in cinema home with dynamic tone mapping on, the S95D in movie mode, tone mapping active, and the U8N in filmmaker mode with dynamic tone mapping on, while the QM8 is in movie mode, also with dynamic tone mapping on, detail priority. On the other hand, look at this shadow detail. A great match for both OLED TVs in this scene, whereas the U8N slightly crushes that shadow detail in full screen content. Both the U8N and the QM8 do amazingly well, with the QM8 having the best combination of contrast and black level of any mini LED TV I've seen to date. Yes, I know, the Bravia 9 is not here to play. That will come later. Just look at the specular highlights with blooming control and brightness and shadow detail on both mini LED TVs. This is a win for both TCL and Hisense. Oh, but wait, you asked me about off-angle viewing, right? Let's take it off angle by 30 to 35 degrees. Yeah, you lose a little bit of color saturation. Yes, the QM8 is good, but wow, the U8N, slightly better. Slightly better blacks off angle and better color saturation, but that's the benefit of ADS Pro panels. Whereas the QM8 is still using a VA panel, Hisense is using the ADS Pro. More importantly, for you guys who are thinking of upgrading in the future, TCL will be releasing an updated VA panel next year that will allow it to compete directly with ADS Pro. Nevertheless, the QM8 still looks pretty good, certainly better than prior generations. And this is why people get OLED, because off angle, the OLED still looks great, but it's not terrible on the QM8. Only you can decide how bad it is. I think it's acceptable. But then again, some of you are more sensitive to off angle, slight desaturation. You will have none of it. I thought it looked fine. I didn't think it was terrible, but you tell me. Next up is shadow detail, but not just shadow detail. We'll talk about shadow detail in the context of a star field. Let's combine the two a little bit. So here, what you see is the QM8 comes very close to the G4 and the S95D. However, in order to preserve all that shadow detail, its peak specular highlight did not quite get as bright as the G4. It's close and definitely ahead of U8N. This is where the U8N is struggling, right? It's preferring to crush the black a little bit, but that little bit completely eliminates all shadow detail. The QM8 instead matches the shadow detail of the G4 and the S95D, giving up just a touch of that specular highlight right there. But what about shadow detail in movies? Okay, let's bring out some of these movie scenes where we start with some of this shadow detail, right? So Dune 2. And you can see it's not perfect, right? Facial expressions are the best way to see shadow detail, and both the OLEDs give you the most shadow detail, with the QM8 crushing the edges. It's not terrible, but I have to mention it's there. So you're going to see a bit more shadow detail on the other two TVs compared to the QM8, but even harder than Dune 2 is this staircase scene from 1917. Both OLED TV nails it with contrast, visibility. You see all the detail, right? The QM8, it's okay, but it's still harder to see. And the U8N, very hard to see. Now, to be fair to both the QM8 and U8N, this is way better than it was just last year. So I see progress. Where will we be next year or the year after? I can't wait. But the fact they've progressed this far, bravo to both TVs. And in the bright movies, unbelievable. The QM8 matched both OLED TVs in contrast, in HDR impact. This is it. Mini LED is here. Even the black bars were black enough. Not perfectly black like the OLED TVs, but so good. I'm not going to complain. I know purists out there, I need it perfectly black. Regardless, the QM8, the best black bars I've seen in bright movies, with the exception of the 8K QM900D, slightly blacker for a whole lot more as well. So this QM8, very impressive. Now compared to last year's QM8, the black bars on this year's QM8 is the same, if not slightly better, where the last year's QM8, the 2023, there would be a touch of blooming here and there. The 2024 QM8 eliminated that blooming to such a degree that I would have to turn up the exposure to notice it. And lastly, colors, skin tone colors to be specific. For the first time, I can say out of the box, this QM8 for 2024 nails it. 2023 QM8, you can tell there were issues. This 2024 QM8, like its U8N competitor, both out of the box, pretty good. I wouldn't complain at all. Obviously, calibration will get it even closer, but neither of these other TVs, the S95D nor the G4, have been calibrated. So you're looking at these comparisons that I'm telling you, they look so close that I would have a hard time telling you which one looks clearly more natural. So the QM8 for 2024, color, skin tones, no complaints. It's time to conclude. And you guys know where we're going here. The TCL QM8 51G for 2024 is indeed where the point of diminishing returns begins. Now you're asking, wait, what about the Hisense U8N? It was pretty close. You saw the comparisons. It kept up more often than not, but it costs the same as the QM8. If the U8N drops in price and there's a $200 separation, yes, I would say at that price, we can say diminishing returns begins with the U8N. But at this price, where it's around 1400, like the QM8, no, that means the QM8 is where it starts. It is slightly better than the U8N more often than not, especially when it comes to shadow detail, tone mapping, and black levels, right? Those 3 points which are important to me and separates the best mini LED from the mid-tier. Here, the QM8 is the best. And before you ask, the Bravia 9 has a challenger. Yes, this 2024 TCL QM8 is a true challenger to the Bravia 9, which it's en route. I should get it any day now. I can't wait for that review. And I'll have both those TVs compared to the Sony reference 3110 true 4000 nit monitor. How close do these TVs get to that monitor? And we'll throw the G4 in, right, and see how good it is compared to the Bravia 9 and the QM8. But without hesitation, I highly recommend the QM8. I know the Hisense U9N has yet to be released, but it only comes in a 75 and 85-inch size. At the 65-inch size, the QM8 appears to be the best value powerhouse HDR TV, bar none, no exceptions, out there. What do you think? What is left to address? Let me know in the comments below, and don't say drop the price by half, because they just might. Until next time, stop the FOMO.